attendees because we were informed that there are about 119 they might believe. But we have to start kasi sayang yung oras. Okay? So, let me introduce to you our speaker, fellow PMAPers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Bebet Reyes, one of the trustees of the PMAP National. I handle the membership committee. I also handle the Tarlac chapter. I'm from Tarlac. Our topic this afternoon is about dealing with the 3Ds: drugs, depression, and deviance. Depression is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Deviance is any behavior that violates social norms or an action that is not acceptable based on standards. Isn't this relevant topic for all of us? Yes. Especially at this point in time, although we are all in HR, but we also have to know about these topics. Okay? Our speaker is a physician with business management and public health experience who has delivered benefits in the field, who has delivered benefits in the field of health promotion, market development, and strategic consulting to both private and public organizations. His career over the past 17 years includes assignments at hospitals, insurers, reinsurers, public health research firms, and employee benefits consulting. He has a keen interest in understanding human behavior and its role in health-related decisions. His experience includes market research and analysis, project management, health promotion activities, football generation, through program implementation. What is this football generation?
Football generation, like basically people walking in to take services.
Okay. Are you familiar with football generation?
No.
Okay. Through program implementation, relationship building activities with key opinion leaders, and digital health solutions building consumer loyalty. He has a bachelor degree in medicine and surgery, a postgraduate in business management from India, and master's in public health from the University of Sheffield, UK. Let us all welcome our speaker, Dr. Amitabh Deka, Head of Well-Being, Southeast Asian Area.
Deka, as I've been introduced. So I just noticed there are a lot of D's, dealing with drugs, deviance, and Dr. Deka, so just getting to do a lot of these. So let's get started. Thanks for your patience. We're waiting for some other people, but to make the best use of your time. First things first. Sorry, let me just try and adjust the height. Okay. Okay. Now, if you look at these numbers, they basically are looking at the average life expectancy of Filipinos. The ones above, the higher one and the better one, are the ladies. The ones below 65 are the males. Now that's the life expectancy at birth. But guess what happens? We go through a lifespan and we contract a lot of diseases and disorders. So if you look at it closely, the effective life people in Philippines end up living are the ones that's mentioned here. 63 and 53. Fine. Which fundamentally means about 15% on an average of the life that we live here is eroded through diseases. Okay? One second. Can you give me that, please, if you don't mind? I'm just struggling with this. Sit it off. No, that's not. Sit it off. So that I should talk? Yeah, so that there's no echo. That's okay. All right. Okay. So what is this 9 years made up of? Don't get overwhelmed by the numbers there. So anything that is in blue are disease conditions which are lifestyle conditions. It's got nothing to do with infection. It's got everything to do with the choices we make as to how we live. Therefore, if you break down those 9 years or 10 years that we lost, you look at ischemic heart disease, taking a fraction of that, stroke, but here's the surprise, back pain, so on and so forth. The ones we bring our attention to is depression and drugs. If you too. So what's the global prevalence when you look at mental health disorders? 11% roughly, mental health and substance abuse of the world population, which gets on there as well. A very high 3.4% for depression, and the average for drug use disorder is roughly about 1%. What does that translate to when we look at the story for Philippines? Any guesses? You probably know some numbers. So about 11 million people in Philippines suffer from some form of mental health diseases or substance disorders. That is a lot. And if you want to break it down about what kinds, so there you go. Roughly about 3% suffer from depression, about 1.5%, 1.6% suffer from drug abuse, and then there are the others. That's a number which should set us thinking. And bear in mind, mental health, alcohol, tobacco, these are always underreported numbers. So these numbers are probably 3 or 4 times more in reality as we go on. We know the social stigma that's associated, we know the difficulty diagnosis, we know the infrastructure which is there. So here's an interesting map which plots many countries, including Philippines there, as against the prevalence of depression, which I said was roughly 3%. And there's the happiness index, about how satisfied the population of Philippines, in this case, is when they look at their own life. So they put it above average to about 6 on 10. It's from 0 to 10. It's one of the relatively happier nations in the region. But you see the depression areas are also relatively high. For me, I mean, every time I've come to Philippines, I remember Philippines for the happiness that gets spread right from the time we land from the airport. Everybody's happy, or at least puts up a very nice and brave face. I mean, to the extent I asked the cab driver the last time I'm here, and I've been here for 6 years, the more I get involved into well-being, and I get asked that, what's the recipe for happiness, etc. as well. I asked the cab driver. He turned around, he smiled and said, is there anything else I can do except from being happy? Because I am anyway in such a desperate state that it's totally up to me to stay happy. Well, that was a very strong philosophy which stayed with me as well. So I appreciate that. So what then is depression? Fundamentally, depression is a mood disorder. We often say that I'm not in a good mood, I'm in a great mood. But here's the thing. Mood will constantly always stay with us. It is the element of unease and the discomfort which comes and brings depression. And it affects, as Madam mentioned, the way we think, the way we act, and the way we behave. So can I get a show of hands, if you are comfortable, do you feel you've ever experienced depression? Mild, moderate, severe? Wow. I'm really encouraged, not just by the fact that you turned up, but by the fact that there's a show of hands. In some of the countries, they'll probably hide their hands, right? So that's very encouraging to figure out. So here's the first thing then. The symptoms, largely the symptoms around depression, right? You get a sense of loss, you get a sense of lack of self-esteem, there is sorrow, despair, dejection, there is guilt, and so on and so forth, which can increase in intensity. So when asked, there's a famous quote that, how do you figure out depression? It's always so fuzzy and fluffy. So depression was made a parallel to with weather. You said, it's like a rainy day. It constantly rains, you feel gloomy, you feel wet, not comfortable, and it stays there. It's a nagging feeling. I would say that that's kind of mild depression, right? So, can we have the audio? What's it there? Is your audio working? Right. So just for the feel, what we put up there, some bit of rain in thunder, right? But what does it feel when it is severe depression? Just give me a moment. I'll take the help of my colleague here. Right? So this is what fundamentally, stay with me, Lester, thanks. So this is what fundamentally chronic or severe depression may feel like. It's very difficult for you to figure out an experience for yourself. That's why I thought it was important you get into the mind of the colleague, the patient, the person who suffers. I've got myself tied up here, I've got myself put there. This is basically to say the walls keep closing in. I can't figure out how to function properly. But you know what? We expect the person to function normally. So maybe I'll go through the presentation this way, so that you get to figure out the expectation, how realistic it is. Right? So let's give it a shot. We are on risk factors. Do you want to just click one? Okay. Right. So the risk factors, the fundamental risk factors for depression is extremely complex. You've got a genetic factor to it. It's often said that between twins, there's a 70% chance of the twin having it if one has it. There's an environmental factor to it, which we are much aware. It's got to do with poverty, it's got to do with domestic violence, it's got to do with bullying. Then there's the biological factor to it. Some chemicals in the brain, which gets you to feel uneasy. There's a personality factor to it. It is said that introverts largely, people with low self-esteem, that kind of personality, they get affected by it. But hey, anybody knows Robin Williams? Right? Well, he died with a smile on his lips. He died entertaining us. Therefore, it's very difficult to really figure out whether only introverts are subject to this or vulnerable to this. What brings it further is, can you read me out a few factors there?
Adverse life events.
Right. So adverse life events, loss of job, loss of a loved one, an accident. The other thing could be your health condition. You could be in a poor physical condition, and it's been already established that cases like diabetes, heart attack, or heart diseases, they have an element to it.
Dysfunctional relationships.
Dysfunctional relationships. Bad with your family, bad at work, bad with your social circle. Any one of them will have an impact. If you look closely, these are strands which make us a social animal. But the moment it is affected, it starts to get into our mind. What else?
Trauma.
Trauma. It could either be mental trauma or physical trauma. Anything which slowly and subtly creeps in.
Hormones.
Hormones. The one I can mention for ladies as well, there's something known as postpartum depression, which is depression after childbirth.
Stress.
Stress, that one won't surprise any of you. Depression can lead to stress, stress can lead to depression, and then there's this vicious cycle.
Drug use and medication.
That is something which we will discuss today. So drug use will have effects on the normal way the body is supposed to function, but the drugs meddle with it, and so it meddles with your mind.
Lastly, poor health.
Yeah, poor health I've already mentioned. So that's the complexity with where it can get into. So stay with me for one more. So what happens with severe depression? Severe depression then affects the ability to function properly. That is the bad thing, which means you really can't lead a normal life. So all the symptoms that we discussed, clinically it is said that if those symptoms exist for about 2 weeks or more, then that's clinical depression. And that's severe depression. The other thing which can happen with depression is recurrence. It can come in episodes, then it can go away, you could think it's done, but not really. One of the other elements is there, it's known as bipolar depression, which means you could have the elements of getting very depressed, quiet, melancholic, and then the alternative episode is getting very irritated, very violent, very intense. That's bipolar depression. And last, the impact it can have is, I can give up. And that give up, that collapse, is known as suicide. So people suffering from depression are 20 times more likely to end in suicide as compared to drug abusers 7 or 8 times. So that's for you to remember and to take home. That is how bad it can get. Well, thanks, Lester. Can you put me on? Well, thanks for bearing with me on that. But it was important for me to do this for you. Otherwise, it's hardly possible that you walk across the shop floor and you appreciate the colleague, the neighbor, or the family member who probably is going through a lot in their mind. That's the difficulty with mental health. First bit, identification. How do you get to know? It could be sadness. How is depression different from grief or sadness? It is different to the point that in depression, people lose their self-esteem. They feel a loss of worth. They feel they are no good to anybody. They shouldn't be there. Nobody will notice that. Well, in grief, you could have the rest of the sadness, etc., but not that element. Okay? So what's treatment for depression? Nothing out of the world. You've heard of that. We call it the talk therapy or the psychotherapy, the ability to have a chat with an expert. But I would say my psychotherapists are my friends, including my father, and he's probably my best friend there. But we find it in our own social circle, the ability to share and find satisfaction from. So psychotherapy doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a clinical counselor, but yes, where required, a clinical counselor is extremely important to go for. And is it a stigma or a no-no, right? You have antidepressants. There are loads of medicine which are around there. You could ask me, do antidepressants work? Well, yes, they do work. The challenge is the right kind of diagnosis, the right kind of medicines, and the duration, and to get the right doctor as well. Rehabilitation, which is largely a mixture of social integration in terms of getting the soft factors around that, getting accepted into the society or the family. Electroconvulsive therapy. So that's something which we often remember for the movies, not a very pleasant one, but you know, it's still standing there for its credibility because it's being seen to work in some cases. We don't exactly know when and which cases, but it hasn't yet gone out of medical science. Even though it's often referred to as very primitive, it is around there as well. And above all, empathy. I think that's the biggest thing, which anybody who is suffering from depression will appreciate. Right? So when you go back to your offices, when you are ever posed with this challenge or have been asked to contribute, please remember, perhaps the magic ingredient is empathy. It is being able to understand, even if you remember that Dr. Deka made a fool of himself with what he did, that's what I want you to remember. Because you will never be able to see that when your friend, colleague, or relative, anybody is walking across. That cloud in the head, that inability to think, yet the expectation that they would need to go ahead with life in a very normal way. Right? Just think of me and the way I presented myself there. Okay, so what are the barriers to care? In Asia, resources, big time. The kind of specialist infrastructure that we're looking for, we're not yet geared about it as well. Because the way we look at health has been very singly focused towards, I can see the disease, I can see physical manifestations, let's go for it. Right? So it is coming up, and that's why we're here today. That's a reflection of our commitment and interest as well. So that's the first thing, having enough resources. But it's a sad plight that most governments in this part of the world invest in less than 1% of the budget for mental health and well-being. But nearly half the people are recognized as being out there and not getting appropriate treatment. The interesting bit which often comes up here, I haven't included, in fact I intentionally excluded that. There's a statement which says for mental health there is a return of $4 for every dollar you invest. I think we've got into this strange habit of putting a dollar value against everything. So even if I have to make an ROI case about why do you need mental health, of course I need mental health because I need to make sure I function properly. But we understand the numbers game, so there it is for you, 1:4. That's a WHO statement. $1 you put in, $4 you get, you could say that to your CFO the next time you make a project probably. The other bit is inaccuracy of diagnosis, and that's something I touched upon when giving out antidepressants and medications. Often because we don't have the right expertise and the resources at hand, the medications which come in don't necessarily come in the right way. So there is a medical negligence part of it as well. And finally, stigma. I was very happy and in a way taken aback when you raised your hands. And as I said, it wouldn't happen in many other countries. I went through a traumatic experience earlier this year. Somebody in my family killed himself. And that was again a person who had that smile on his lips and would always, oh, he's a good boy. Well, in that all good boy thing, he decided to take the final step. So, and again, my family is still divided on whether we want to tell everyone how it happened or what happened. It is still there. I mean, we come from a reasonably middle-class family, as we say that, but we're constantly struggling with that. You know. How do we cope with the stigma? Okay. We've already established the link between drugs and depression. We'll speak a bit about that before we progress to that. Let's talk about a few deviant behaviors. Deviant, as the word itself says, anything away from normal. Right? In this context, there's a bit of negativity and pessimism around that as well. But while deviant could also be a change agent, right? But what do we mean when we say deviant behaviors here? There are a couple of theories out there. I'll probably just touch upon a few. Let's say the biological theory. It says that biologically, some people who show deviant behavior are already primed genetically. They've got these things already in them. It's a different gene. If they've got a criminal gene or they've got a non-intelligent gene, or there's this debate out there as well. Labeling theory. Labeling theory basically says that it's the society which has decided to label good from the bad, accepted from the non-accepted, and the very fact that labels are put in, it incites some individuals to say, well, I'll fight against this label. So that's one bit of the theory which puts in there. You have the structural stress theory. So this is quite accepted. It's proposed by the father of sociology called Deka. The structural stress theory says that when the societal structure is under stress by not being managed properly, it could be a weak society, people not being able to thrive in it, then it gives rise to deviant behaviors, or people decide to take matters in their own hands. So what are the key parameters or the touch points when we look at deviant theory? One, there's self, and this could be violence, this could be stealing, this could be begging, anything which ostracizes self. There's the state, which means there is a code of law and regulation, and we decided to break it. And that could anything which relates to criminal activities. And you would totally appreciate that even the definition of being criminal, it starts to vary as you move across the globe, which is a reflection of this social culture. So drugs, if you say, would probably fall between both of them, because you violate yourself, and in most cases you violate the state codes. There's the sexual code, which could be pedophilia, which could got to do with polygamy, it's got to do with bestiality. So these are largely things which are looked upon the moment we start talking about deviant behaviors. But today, we're talking about drugs. Drug abuse, something which we've probably grown up, people in the room, around in the generation. How bad does it get? So what are the predisposing factors? We've spoken about one already, high stress. High stress gives the option to drug takers to feel that it relieves them of a lot of stress, because they start to live in a much more unrealistic, pleasant world, and probably also adds on a bit of pleasure as you keep taking more drugs. So the inability to cope with them is a trigger. Low social capital. This could be if people coming from migration, people are not in a socio-economic status which gives them good access to welfare activities, so on and so forth. Weak social sources. This means that people get access to not the right kind of people. Instead, the social fabric which they are exposed to is pretty much weak. Deviant social networks, it means friend, family, there is somebody who's experimented with drugs and has decided to introduce that, or perhaps even join in gangs. Here is a dangerous thing to say. So this is the spread of substance users in the Philippines. the percentages which you look at on your left are percentages of the population you have in Philippines who are known to be subject to drug abuse. So if you look at this, you see the youngsters in their 20s and somewhere around there. That's the highest bit. Teenagers and just about getting onto the teenage bit as well. It's roughly been estimated that somewhere around 65% of the drug users in Philippines fall between these categories. So it's almost like saying, back in India we refer it to as, we're making our new generations very hollow. They're being eaten from inside. And like in most countries, developed countries now as well, drug abuse is creeping up there. And why does that happen, particularly around that? That happens, and the culprit, or rather the pivot of all this is the brain, a fancy way of showing the brain rather. So the way we decide to take pleasure, live life, do action, all that comes from the center of the brain. It is known as the limbic system, right? That is the one which gives us the pleasure points. I want to do this, I want to live life. It's the bottom of the pyramid in Maslow's hierarchy, food, shelter, sex. That's it, you're functioning, everything is fine. But there's a particular element to it. The ability to decide, the ability to control, the ability to take decisions lies here. This is known as the prefrontal cortex. And the funny thing here is that develops only by the time you're 20. Which means, when we are using the limbic system, having fun and enjoying the pleasure, and all these teenagers are, starting from 15, etc., they actually practically have not developed the ability to take that decision rightly. So if you viewed them in a different light, I would request you to rethink. They are not just spoiled brats or people who are probably very arrogant. They biologically have not developed that ability, because this part of the brain is the last part to develop. And this is the decision-taking faculty. Which is why the drug makers and the drug peddlers catch them young, because that is where they plant the seeds for addiction. A youngster can't decide for themselves. And that is why things like driving and all, that age is around 18 plus 20. Please be mindful of that next time you see a teenager suffering. What are the stages of substance abuse? Sounds pretty logical around there. And sorry, can I just request, for most people, if it makes you comfortable, I am sharing these slides. I'm not going to say that. Don't worry about that. So, just if it makes you comfortable, right? Okay, so first bit is initiation and experiment. The experiment bit goes much with the teenagers. I want to see what's the cool thing. I want to see what it is all about in the movies. I want to see what narcos feels like, right? So, the other adults, they start with initiation. It could be a trigger, one of the predisposing factors we had, trauma, stress, depression. If they start initiating, then it goes to a bit more, then it starts to get a bit more. So this is use, then it becomes abuse, which means the excessive dosage. Then comes the stage of tolerance, where your body can take it. Right? So you reach a threshold and you say, yeah, so I can handle this. Right? The point is, at this midpoint, there is a misnomer in the heads of the addicts that they feel they can handle it. That's fine, I got this. Right? That's actually the toughest part, that you've not developed tolerance, which means you will take extra dosage till it does that massive harm. Right? So this confidence comes at an extremely wrong time. So then there is dependence, where they would need regular inputs around that as well, but they can still manage it. They don't get it every Tuesday. They'll probably do it for a Thursday or so. They will struggle with the withdrawal symptoms, but they can manage that. Then it's addiction. And then you know what I mean. Then it becomes their life. It's breathing in, breathing out. That is what they live for eventually, sadly. So there are the aspects of getting out of addiction, or there's this risk of relapsing. Okay? So I just want to quickly show you, how does this whole thing work? So just to look at the opioid user's brain. So you have a normal activity. In this case, the kick hormone is endorphins. Right? So there are two largely. One, we call it as dopamine, that gives you the pleasure, the highs of life. endorphin is something similar. So in a normal user, you've got some decent amount of receptors and it gets getting injected, right? You've got endorphins. The moment you start using opioids, right? So there's a rush of all these hormones which starts giving you the high, you get the overdose, right? Your brain starts accepting it. Of course, your brain goes, well, what's this new guest right there? Oh, but I'm liking it, man, it's nice, right? So the brain starts getting used to that. And then it moves on to create more receptors. So you've got extra guests in your house and you've decided to get some extra beds to accommodate those guests. Right. First it was, all kind of manage it, but then you start accommodating it. So now your brain's got extra receptors compared to somebody who is not getting into addiction. And what happens? Tolerance develops, which means your body then gets used to it. And beyond the point, your brain cannot develop far extra receptors. And this is where it starts then craving. The moment it can't meet up there, and if you get into withdrawal symptoms, then there are other elements to it. This is how tolerance develops. I will narrate a similar incident now, and let me see if you can guess what condition is that. So there's another condition in the body. So this foreign agent comes into the body, foreign agent meets the body receptor inside, it gets pretty much welcome, and it gets led into the body system, right? That's required, it works. Then more loads and loads of foreign agent comes in, and then what happens that the internal agent in the body just stops reacting to that because the agent is no longer able to respond to that bit. And these foreign agent then starts flowing in your blood, right? Can anybody guess what is that story? What flows in the blood? What is that agent which comes in? And then the body stops taking it. It is very similar to this. Any guesses? Sugar. That is it. We are very kind and nice to say insulin-resistant diabetes mellitus. Bingo. You don't get any stigma for that, except saying, oh, you're a sweet lady. Yeah? But when it happens here, we just try and decide to act on it differently. Why is that a disease which is pretty much accepted? And by the way, diabetes is not a disease in the medical world, it's a disorder, it's a syndrome, it's a metabolic syndrome. There is no agent, we cause the agents as well. And sugar at one point in time, the earlier years, when it was found out, manufactured, was known as the cocaine of that time. It was the crack, it was the one which you got addicted to. The white substance, it was a white substance even then. But the point I make here is, you will have diabetes programs, you'll have Let's Fight Diabetes, everybody's kind of doing it as well. You can eat yourself to death. But when this tolerance develops here, you all of a sudden start behaving differently. Not even looking at this as a medical aspect as well. That is the parallel I wanted to draw, and for you to understand that the body is responding the same. Okay? So what I'm going to show you now is a clip from a movie, not sure if you've heard of it, it's called A Beautiful Boy. It's been written by the author and the son themselves as well, who will see that. And it's a story of crystal meth addiction. And I understand in Philippines, shabu, as it's known, crystal meth is very popular. It just gets far too intense in terms of how people can handle that. Okay? I want you to look at what the feelings and the engagement between a father-son. I accidentally picked up this movie when I was traveling around because I'm very close to my son, 11-year-old, and I pick on any movies which talk about relationship and how I can be a better father, so I just wanted to go through that. But that's an intense scene which caught me, so I want to share that with you. Can we just watch the volume, please? Yeah, I'll just put it on. Yes, if you relax. Just have lunch. Talk. You can do that, right?
They asked about you. Is there stuff up next week? And I know they'd love to see you.
You're guilt tripping me, alright?
No, I'm just saying.
I feel horrible about myself.
I know they wanted you to be there, that's all.
I'm sorry, Dad. I just need some money, alright? So, Please, please.
And where is this at?
I gotta see something through. This is kind of working out for me right now. I got 5 days sober.
It doesn't look like it's working
Yeah.
out, Nick.
Oh, it doesn't look like it's working out. So what, the
No.
therapy, huh?
You can come home.
No, that
We'll
wouldn't
make it work, please, Nick. Please. I've been doing some research.
And research, you gotta be kidding me, Dad.
You think that you have this under control. And I understand how scared you are.
I understand why I do things. It doesn't make me any different, alright? I'm attracted to craziness, and you're just embarrassed because I was like, I was like this amazing thing, like your special creation or something, and you don't like who I am now.
Yeah, who are you, Nick?
This is me, Dad. Here, this is who I am.
Can I check with you? Did you see a range of how to cope with it as well? But this can sometimes be intimidating when you come across someone who shows this intensity. But really, this is what they're going through. It's not them trying to prove a point at any point in time. So if you, in fact, to summarize what you just saw, and it's easier to remember it as the ABCDE of addiction. 1 is the inability to abstain. B is the behavioral impact, which is an impaired bit. There's this craving, which comes in and brings in a bit of insanity when it comes across. There is diminished recognition of significant problem with one's behavior and interpersonal relationship. Pretty much can be very deadly combination with depression. Right? And there's dysfunctional emotional response. So that's the stage where addiction gets to. As you can see that, we spoke about the mechanisms and why that can happen. It just hampers your normal activity and the ability to think and act. Okay? Okay, I'm not sure what this is. Sorry, wrong button. Okay, so before we get there, there it is. So what's the government doing to help? All of us know that the mental health stature has come out. So that's a great step to be able to identify, recognize, probably even give this headspace to corporates and employers to respond in a way which destigmatizes, creates awareness, and asks you to put in resources so that you can cope with these kind of requirements. So I'm sure you know the details of this much more than I do, but I totally understand and support these bit of initiatives. Portugal is an example of a country which actually decriminalized drug abuse, technically, and they look at it in a very different way. As Mam was mentioning, I did my master's in the UK, and out there, even for things like cigarette smoking, as a public health expert, I wasn't allowed to put an iota of blame on the cigarette user. It's known as victim blaming there. So understand the circumstances and helping that. The government has a big role to play. Absolutely. It's almost a public-private partnership there. What can you do? Increase awareness. You've heard quite a bit today in this half an hour, and hopefully I've been able to send across some messages, some that you would remember, some that you may not. Whichever bits you choose to remember, I hope that's going to make a change. Correct the stigma. Hopefully, if you had certain reservations or understanding, I've been able to reinforce some and challenge some in the right direction. You put your hand up. I shared with you that I do had an incident around there as well. And just to share, actually, then provide support. And I should speak highly of my employer. When this incident happened with me, my boss not only just said that, you don't have to send me a WhatsApp, get on the next plane out. All my colleagues, they rallied around me, and almost for 3 weeks, they just held the front. People did things which I typically do. They stepped in, they conducted workshops in lieu of me as well. That kind of tremendous support can go a long way. It's not money invested, it's just about social networks and empathy invested, right? So it's got to do with culture. Facilitate access. Wherever you get access through your health providers, the government, the HMOs, or other experts you know, that's how you can help. How can we help? We typically look into health and well-being, and we use a logical framework whenever we're dealing with corporates. We call it the 4D approach. I won't bore you with that, so that's perhaps my only salesy slide here. So we spend some time understanding the situation. We will do the same for mental health. that what is the prevalence rate, what are the factors, why would we do it, then we look at strategies and plans, how can it be delivered within the organization in line with the culture, etc. How do you measure the progress that you've made? Now we've talked about some heavy stuff today, so I wanted to end up with something on a slightly better, lighter note as well. So we spoke about deviant behaviors, where the social media has got a lot to play today. So let me end with something, not sure if all of you have heard it. It's the bottle cap challenge. If you haven't, so let me just end with that. Before we sign off today, just so you remember, 2 important days if you want to make a difference in your workplace or if you want to raise that up. So what's coming up is the World Suicide Prevention Day and the World Mental Health Day. I would now like to open up the floor for questions. If you want to reach me, these are my contact details. So thank you for being a lovely audience, and I'm sorry if I traumatized anyone with whatever we did, but it's important that I send home the idea for you to understand that it's not very easy to tangibilize mental health. Right? Any questions? Oh, I'm going to ask questions.
Any question?
Yeah, from Vanguard Center for Leadership.
Yeah.
It's more of a query than a question. I just want to know if do you have like a facility or a chat group or a room in the social media that people with depression who are afraid to come out, especially those who have substance abuse and then got depressed along the way, who wants to like share some best practices, or those who really seek help that they can get into, or it's in public knowledge, a chat room or forum like that.
So unfortunately, and facilitators, we can get in touch and provide a common forum for people who provide this. I mean, the commonest thing which goes across is EAP, right? But hardly anybody uses that. Less than 5%, nobody cares. But it's important to find those niche groups who are relevant to Philippines. So as we've only started to work on this since about early this year. We'll be running more such engagement in the market, which is why it will be important for us to provide you just that aggregation of people who would do that. But we don't do that. And we don't see ourselves doing that. We can facilitate that, even if it's on the social media.
Please, can I ask why?
That's not something which we do as a business model. We don't manufacture, we don't have the medical expertise in-house. So, I mean, we're not from an HMO or have hospitals around there. So that's typically the way we are placed.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I can believe this.
Employees from the tropics to the cold, because we've had experiences where people from the tropical countries who are made to work in like Norway, where 8 months of the year it's dark, they get depressed.
There are studies, exactly what you said, the cold weather. There are more studies reiterating, in fact, if you were in Icelandic conditions, those clients, depression sets in much more. because it becomes very gloomy. Right?
So like as a matter of something that, you know, that data can be...
Yeah, the research is something we can help provide.
Today, even though the level of, I want to know if, you know, there's a level of intensity which you can say that you are really depressed, because most of the time when you check online and hear young people saying I'm depressed, but you'll just know that that person lost a toy or, you know, just little stuff. But I think it's not healthy saying that I am depressed. I think it sparks something. So what can you say about that?
Don't worry, I'll scream.
Okay.
So the thing with depression is there has to be loss of self-worth. There is a loss of self-esteem. You start to feel that you're worth nothing. So in terms of clinical depression, it is said that you need to be in that state for more than 2 weeks. It is not about feeling sad. Right? It's not about feeling, oh, I'm not feeling great today, you know, I missed a movie, or my bike had a puncture. It's about getting, if you lose your self-worth because your bike had a puncture, then there's a problem anyway, right? But that's the differentiation. It gets to an impact where at the value level, you lose your own, you know, will to live or will to do, right? And 2 weeks and more, you need to stay on that for being labeled a clinical depression.
Yeah, thank you. Because I want to say that because most of the time, I think I believe that's not healthy for parents to hear or a colleague to hear, because
So which then talks about awareness. It's educating the right way, right? My son says that to me, by the way. Now that you said, oh dad, I'm depressed, I'll just shut up and we slap. We're Asian, we slap.
Hi, and basically one of the problems is that it's currently in its infancy stage. And if we have mental health constraints in our organization, most often than not, it's lodged within the responsibility of HR. And I think most HR managers, if not most HR managers, are not actually ready for this. So do you have any suggestions as to the basic programs that we should employ in our organizations, so more at least be the first line of defense in terms of mental health constraints in our organizations?
I'm very tempted to say it for you to find out and have instruments. We can call it questionnaires or surveys. And bear in mind, they can always be packaged differently. It could be engagement survey, it could be team building survey, is to find out the mood and the mental status of your employees. So find out your baseline. For anything you do around health, for anything, you need to have a baseline. Then you have a purpose where you want to get to. Then you decide the culture in between. How can the culture help you get from A to B? Find out your A. That's the first thing to set up a program. Okay? Okay, so I've been asked to get out of the room.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending Dr. Amitabh's session. If you would like to receive a copy of the deck, feel free to approach me and give me a business card, so at least we can send it in private and ensure that you receive. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dek. Wait, we will still give something to Dr. Dek. Deka. Thank you very much for a very enlightening session this afternoon. We would like to give this as a token of our appreciation for discussing a very relevant topic this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.